Good afternoon, I am Myung. So through the first session in the morning today, we shared the insights upon the US-led international order and its changes. And for the afternoon session today, we're going to share our thoughts and insights about the security on the Korean Peninsula in an era of new geopolitics, commemorating the first anniversary of the Camp David ROK-U.S. Japan Trilateral Summits. So to this end, our colleagues and the top opinion leaders of Korea are gathered here today, like Mr. Young-kwan, as well as Mr. Chang. So prior to having the panel discussion, there are the congratulatory remarks from His Excellency Philip Seth and His Excellency MIZUSHIMA Koichi. Let's take a look.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Seoul Diplomacy Forum organizers and Dr. Che for this opportunity to provide remarks at this year's event. I'd also like to thank those in the room and those in the audience who have worked at all levels to build upon our trilateral commitments from Camp David. 1 year ago, when Presidents Biden and YOON and Prime Minister Kishida met at Camp David in Maryland, they stood together to inaugurate a new era of trilateral cooperation and partnership. This 1 year anniversary celebrates a new era for our three democracies. All three countries recognize that our shared values of democracy, freedom, and a commitment to an international rules-based order make us stronger, safer, and more prosperous when we work together. Our partnership is essential to our geopolitical futures. So today, I offer my congratulations for the accomplishments of this past year, and I'd like to highlight a few of the key areas of cooperation. On the security side, we developed shared capabilities to better respond to North Korea provocations and potential nuclear threats. Our respective militaries are now training together with integrated exercises that sharpen our joint capabilities. This will strengthen our cooperation on regional emergencies or crises and build important relationships between the men and women serving in uniform. By working together over the past year, we are better positioned to de-escalate dangerous situations and promote stability in the region. As we've deepened our security partnership, we've furthered our cooperation in the economic security and technology spheres. We're strengthening our supply chains, engaging in technology sectors that will underpin the next century, and expanding our collaboration to meet the challenges that we'll collectively face. From commerce and industry ministers promoting semiconductor and clean energy technologies, to working level programs that advance women and girls in STEM, we're retooling our economies and institutionalizing our partnerships. We're building a solid foundation for our trilateral relationship to have a further impact in the region. Our countries are also working together across all levels of government on sustainable development and assistance goals for the region. Much of this work is enabled through people-to-people connections that leverage relationships to ensure a more prosperous and secure life for all our citizens. Our Global Leadership Youth Summit hosted in Busan last month was one such example. Future leaders from our respective countries collaborated on proposals to address issues such as public health and ethical AI development, laying the groundwork for next year's meeting in Japan. In these efforts, we're bringing together our best and brightest to act on some of the most pressing global challenges facing the world today. Over this past year, from Seoul to Tokyo to Washington, we've advanced our partnerships and positioned ourselves to increase prosperity, protect democracy, and defend the rules-based international system. With 60-plus trilateral engagements, we've recommitted our institutions and invested in people-to-people connections to pursue an integrated future. And we've laid the foundations for this trilateral engagement to grow. Our geopolitical landscape today requires us to meet challenges together. In this landscape, there is a great premium placed on cooperation, collaboration, and bringing common approaches to shared challenges. Especially in the Indo-Pacific, our ability to preserve peace, promote trade, and pursue development goals will require us to work together. Our trilateral partnership is key to this shared future. As such, we must all keep sight on what we can do together and carry this new era forward. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon to you all. It is indeed my great pleasure to congratulate all of you for participating in the Seoul Diplomacy Forum 2024, hosted by the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. The world is now at a critical turning point of history. In this East Asia region, in particular, we are facing serious challenges against the peace and stability. In order to maintain and strengthen the free and open international order based on the rule of law in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, the cooperation of our three countries that share common values is not only desirable, but essential. In that context, I've been impressed with the progress of the trilateral cooperation among Japan, the ROK, and the United States at various levels, as well as bilateral relations and in diverse areas of international affairs since the historic Trilateral Summit meeting held in August last year at Camp David. On the 18th of last month, the three countries issued a joint leaders' statement on the anniversary of the Trilateral Leaders Summit at Camp David. The three countries commemorated the tremendous progress in our trilateral cooperation in the year and showed an unshakable belief that our trilateral cooperation is indispensable for meeting today's challenges and will set the stage for a prosperous future. In order to deliver tangible and meaningful outcome from Camp David Summit, we need to continue to substantiate the agreement and follow through on the specific results of the summit. This fall, new leaders of both Japan and the United States will be chosen. Whoever the new leaders will be, the significance of the trilateral cooperation among three countries will not diminish. I hope such cooperation will be renewed and be strengthened more in the coming days and years. In addition, I would like to highlight the government of Japan's announcement that Prime Minister Kishida Fumio will visit Seoul from tomorrow. I'm confident that deepening Japan-ROK relations will further strengthen trilateral cooperation among Japan, ROK, and the United States. In this session too, I understand the security issues of the Korean Peninsula will be discussed by former high-ranking ROK government officials, moderated by Mr. Lee Moon-hee, Senior Executive Director at KNDA. I look forward to an active discussion at the session based on the recent further progress in cooperation, including the start of real-time sharing DPRK missile warning data, the success of trilateral exercise Freedom Edge, and the recent Trilateral Defense Ministers meeting. Last but not least, I would like to highly commend the ROK Minister of Foreign Affairs and Korean National Diplomatic Academy to make today's event happen. In concluding my congratulatory remarks, I would like to wish for the positive future of the trilateral cooperation and wish all the participants all the best and success in the future. 감사합니다. Thank you very much.
예,
Thank you for your remarks, His Excellency Goldberg and His Excellency MIZUSHIMA. Thank you again. As mentioned before, the two ambassadors mentioned that it marks the first anniversary of Camp David, which highlighted the response to North Korea and the regional peace and prosperity based on the trilateral cooperation. These were the agreements that was adopted at Camp David a year ago. So regarding the result and the future task, we're going to have a discussion with the panelists from now. This is quite vast and inclusive agreements, but basically it highlights the U.S.-Korea alliances and as well as the trilateral partnership. So from His Excellency Mr. Young-kwan, please, the floor is yours. His Excellency Young-kwan, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I am Yoon-kwan. First of all, I'd like to thank Chancellor Chang, Che of the KDNA, and Professor Lee, and the staff members who organized this event. Thank you very much. After I attending the first session, I had a lot of thoughts. So during the short period of time given to me, I will discuss on the topics that were given by Mr. Lee, and ahead of it, regarding the declining leadership of the U.S., I want to make one thing. And from the perspective of Korea, we need to think about what kind of strategy we should implement. And when it comes to a strategic choice, we need to think about the challenges that we face above all. And then I'll talk about the Korea-Japan cooperation and Korea-US cooperation. In the previous session, the basic assumption was made that the primacy of US is declining. But in fact, we need to make an analysis of that assumption and the approach to it. And in terms of material resources, for example, the economic power and military power, the power of the US after the post-Cold War still holds the 25% of the world's GDP. And the problem is that despite that kind of abundance material resources, the will of the US to exert its leadership over the global affairs is declining, and so we have to take note of it. For example, recently, according to the Washington Post columnist Farid Jakar, right after the Second World War, the UK, with the 4% of the GDP, built the Commonwealth, tried to manage the entire area of the 25% of the total land mass of the world. But in the 1990s and in the 20s, the US took up to 25% of the world's GDP. Nevertheless, the US seems to have some problem when it comes to exercising its power in terms of economy and military, and we can see it this way. I think the most important thing is the domestic matters. The conservative and democratic parties that the U.S. should not be behind the China in terms of economy and military, and that made China overreact to the U.S. And in some sense, some people view that the U.S. should not intervene over the world's affairs. So that is a very strange situation that we need to take note of. And in that sense, on the coming December 5th, the US will have the presidential election, and the result of the election will be set a important milestone in the world order. And if the Democratic nominee is elected, then that person with the pride and confidence will maintain the leadership in the world, and that the country will continue the absolute engagement. When the Republican Party take office, we'll see more isolationist approach toward the world affairs, and that will lead the U.S. in the end will regret about what it will do, because unlike the past, the interdependence is accelerating. If a country choose the politically, economically isolation approach, that will backfire itself. So in this regard, so one should make a right judgment of the current situation. In the past, the US and Soviet Union staged the Cold Era, and yearly the trade volume is about $2 billion. But in the US China trade volume is reaching about 2 billion a day. So this indicates the current economic situation. This means also that we cannot go back to the isolationist era. And second of all, if Korea needs to make a strategic decision, we need to think about three important factors in terms of challenges. First, the geopolitical challenge. Korean Peninsula is surrounded by four major powers. And the problem is that these powers have been engaged in competition and rivalry all the time in history. And that kind of dynamic had made a great influence on the Korean Peninsula. Now, the US-China geopolitical rivalry is very serious, and so at the moment, the competition for the primacy, Korea need to think those partners. So one is a economic partner, and the other one is the political partner, and these should be thought of seriously. So which external policy should Korea make? And that question should be answered thoroughly based on the clear understanding of the current situation. So every factors are interconnected. The politics and diplomacy and economy are intertwined. So when we think about the diplomatic strategy, we need to think about these intertwined factors. So we may be in a situation where we should choose both the economic partnership and the diplomatic partnership as well. And the second of all, the liberal world order is declining. The liberal international order is a very important matter for Korea. If it declines, we are in a very serious and difficult situation. So during the colonial rule on the Korean Peninsula, the power means the justice. So at the time, we were ruled by the colonialists. And the principle of respecting the sovereignty was not respected and complied. So at the time, the colonialists prevailed other countries. And after 1945, in the new world order, Korea has become the 12th largest economy and has become democratized. Korea is a small country, and we heavily dependent on international trade. So for Korea, the liberal international order and the rule-based international order is very crucial and important. In some sense, relatively compared to the major powers surrounding Korean Peninsula, this type of international order and norms and rules are shielding Korea. And also, the national security has become an important issue. And in particular, since 2012, North Korea rejected any type of dialogue, and it is intensifying the antagonistic approach, and that is creating a very negative atmosphere. And we are talking about the possible nuclear arms development by North Korea. So given all these, between China and the US, so Korea need to take a very strategic position, and the answer is very clear. Unlike the past, considering all those current issues, we need to strengthen the relation with the US. That is a very strategic and clear answer. And at the same time, with Japan, we need to cooperate with Japan as well. How can we manage the relations with Japan? How can we strategically handle the relation with Japan? And to answer that question, we need to make two choices. First, the Korean people and the decision makers need to have a specific perspective toward Japan. So there can be some emotional approach, and there could be the approach based on the national interest. In my opinion, we need to take an approach based on the national interest. In that sense, improving the relation with Japan in terms of joint reaction to the threat from North Korea and the global level, Korea's vision to become the middle power and the major power on the world venue, we can take advantage of the relationship with Japan as a stepping stone toward become the major power. So I think the strengthening the relation with Japan is a strategic choice. So in that sense, the trilateral relations should be improved. That is a very proper and rational approach. So in that sense, the Camp David, the summit recognized the important principle of the pursuing the trilateral cooperation, and I think that kind of principle should be honored going forward. With the relationship with China, China is an important and the largest trade partner. The trade between Korea and China is composed of 60% of the raw material and the other important materials. So this shows the importance of the Korea-China relations. So mutual respect and mutual preference should be thought of as an important element when it comes to relationships with China. So we need to make a stronger trilateral relations with the US and Japan, and also regarding the consensus made during the Camp David summit, I want to emphasize this. So when you look at the economic trend, the security and trade and economy are all intertwined, interlinked. And those who we do not trust will not be the partner to develop a technology or to make a trade with. So considering this, the three countries summits met with each other at Camp David. So in the advanced technology, including the quantum computing and AI, the three countries promised to contribute to setting the standards of the advanced technology, and Korea joined that partnership. And I think in that sense, it's very meaningful result. So the three important challenges and the security, technology, and are intertwined. So given all these considered, their cooperation between Korea, Japan, and the US has become significant and important more than ever. before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency. So he shared his thoughts on the overall changes in the international situation, and plus he also shared his thoughts on the meaning of the Camp David. So next, His Excellency Hwan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really delighted to be with you today, and I'm really grateful for the invitation to today's venue. So today, I would like to share my thoughts on my previous presenter of Mr. Young-kwan. Actually, I took notes while he was delivering his messages because I do not want to make abundant messages for my own presentation. That was the reason that I took notes. So if you take a look at the bigger picture, Mr. Yoon was right. So I would like to add my own thoughts on details. So regarding the domestic politics of Korea, after 1987, there were some competition and conflicts between the conservative and liberals, and in the term of 10 years, the government has been changing, and even from the liberal camp, they highlighted the importance of the US-Korea alliance. In particular, given the Ukrainian war, many Koreans say that the US-Korea alliance is very important. And I was in the practice of diplomacy for a long time. I realized that in order to enhance the US-Korea alliance, we have to consider, we have to think that Korea-Japan relations must be enhanced and improved on the context of US-Korea alliance because of the situation in the Northeast Asia. So we have to think about Japan to think about the bigger picture of US-Korea alliance. So from US perspective, actually the Korea-Japan relation must be in a good shape so that the US policies towards the region can be in a good shape too. So this is the reason that we cannot separate the importance of the US-Korea alliance and Korea-Japan relations. So as of now, as Minister Yoon said, there are three factors in geopolitics, and given these factors, the conflict or competition between US and China must be considered as one important factor. So which path Korea would choose is the matter, but I believe that Korea already has chosen the direction back in 1950s when the Korean War was at a cease. I believe that Korea has already chosen the liberal market economy system and open and fair international liberalism. So under the framework of open and liberal internationalism, we are promoting our economy based on trade. This is how we could achieve the top 12 or top 7 economic power in the world. So I would like to say that again, that Korea has already chosen our own path. And regarding Camp David summit and its agreement, as a diplomat, I was encouraged and I was touched. That was quite an emotional moment to see the agreement from Camp David. So this is not just a trilateral summit, and this is not just a flowery declaration. It's more than that. So it has the spirit of Camp David and the principles in it. And commitment. So these three elements set the future direction for the region. So Korea, US, and Japan will tighten its cooperation at each level, from the presidential to the ministerial and even to the working level. So they will have regular meeting at each level. This is one agreement from Camp David, and President Yoon had 11th summit with his counterpart from Japan. So tomorrow we're gonna welcome Prime Minister Kishida Fumio from Japan. So about 130 years ago, because of the Sino-Japan War or Rus-China War, and the situation on the Korean Peninsula at the late Joseon Dynasty, the Korean Peninsula was the venue for the regional powers to compete with. So at that time, the powers were expanding its own influence to check and take a balance to the growing power from Imperial Russia. That was the reason that the US supported China and Japan at that time. And as a result, the sphere of influence over the Korean Peninsula was recognized at that time. But thanks to the agreement from Camp David, the value of democracy and the deterrence to the totalitarian regimes or the issues of South China or other regional issues were discussed along with the leader from the US and Japan. That was really an emotional moment as a diplomat. Korea is a global power now. That was really a touching moment. So as Minister Yoon said, the trilateral cooperation is not an option. It's an essential choice. It's an essential choice for Koreans. So the international situation is fluctuating due to a number of wars like Israel, Hamas, or the China-Taiwanese conflict. So things are uncertain now. However, for Korea, we have to back up and bolster the trilateral cooperation between the US, Korea, and Japan. Again, this is an inevitable option for us. And I would like to add something regarding North Korean issues. Of course, China doesn't want North Korea going nuclear. It's against a nuclear North Korea. However, regarding economy, security, North Korea is heavily depending upon China and recently conducted the sixth nuclear test. So, in reality, the international society recognized North Korea as a nuclear power. So the regional powers of China and Russia, as well as the US, must take some responsibility of this North Korea going nuclear now. So we cannot just be negligent of North Korea developing nuclear weapons. So it can just fire to Beijing. So under the circumstances, the regional members must discuss the issue of North Korean nuclear problem, not just by speaking, but by practice. So now is the time to have a practical level meetings or discussions regarding North Korean nuclear issue. And the issues regarding China is really very important these days. And about a few years ago, for the first time, Korea, China, and Japan had summits in Fukuoka. And before that, there were some regional summits, but that marked the first ever trilateral summit between Korea, China, and Japan in Fukuoka. And the following meetings were taking place in China and in Korea in turn. So this is quite desirable to see because we must encourage China to engage in these type of dialogues for a stabilization of the region. So back in 2008, Korea suggested the establishment of cyber secretariat office. So the physical secretariat office was established in Korea. So I believe that Korea can play a certain role for the trilateral cooperation between Korea, China, and Japan. So in order to enhance the cooperation, Korea can play the role of a bridge so that the interests could be adjusted. So these trilateral cooperation in the region can also be strengthened because we have common interests. I believe this is the desirable future direction. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency. Based on the experiences of decades, he honestly shared the opinion on the outcomes of the Camp David principle. Next, I'd like to ask Mr. Hwan for comment. So, hello, I am Han Min-gu, and the previous two panelists have narrated the diplomatic perspectives on the Korea-US-Japan relations. I myself want to highlight the military aspect of the relations and the implication. The biggest threat to our national security would be the North Korean nuclear activity, and the Ministry of Defense has made to address that issue. So I will focus my comment on those issues. First of all, I'd like to talk about the Indo-Pacific, the Pacific area, with the focus on the relation between the China and the US. The two countries are intensifying rivalry, and with that, the possibility of conflict is increasing. So on the anniversary of 10th centennial of the Chinese Revolution, China has this dream to socialize the other countries, and to make that dream true by 2030, the country has a vision to modernize its military, and by the end of the 21st century, China has a goal to become the strongest military power, and that effort had been started decades ago. So China is making progress. So if we look at the Chinese military, it is believed to be the power to address all the military powers from around the world. So if you look at the naval forces, the country has the strongest naval forces. The aircraft carrier has about 3 units. Of course, the US has 11 of aircraft carriers, so there is a power gap. But still, China is one of the strongest naval forces. And also in the Indo-Pacific region, China has a strong air forces, and it also has a new type of ICBM, and it is increasing the nuclear armament. And it is intensifying the activities on the South China Sea, and it declared that it will not give up ambition on the Taiwan Strait. And it is projecting its power on the military front around the world. The Chinese military power is defined as the strongest competitor by the US. And so the country is forging the alliances with the countries surrounding China, and it deploys its military arms and the resources surrounding China. The UK and the Sweden's research institutes made an analysis of the national defense budget. The US, the the US invested about the 860 billion, and the China the 390 billion, and the Russia 125 billion, and the India about 7 billion. And the US is spending the largest amount of budget on the national defense. And the China is also investing a lot. So the two countries' national budget combined is spending the larger amount of money than the defense budget combined by the other countries' national budget. So the two countries make a lot of effort to build its military power to become the strongest players, and it is building the alliance networks on the Indo-Pacific region. So it is building and expanding its network in this area and region. So the Indo-Pacific Command assessed this by 2025. Overall, the US military power is ahead of the other countries, but when it comes to the military resources that are deployed on the Indo-Pacific region, China will be ahead of the US, and that's the prediction by the IPEF. And in the northeastern region, Korea-US alliance is getting stronger, and the North Korea, China, Russia's alliances will become stronger. And at Camp David, the three countries declared the strong collaboration. So we predict that the three countries, the military alliances will become stronger. So many countries focus on the Israeli-Palestinian war and the Russia-Ukraine war. So the uncertainty is increasing, and the US is implementing win and hold strategy. And at the moment, with the two wars occurring, the strategy of the national defense is facing a important and very significant challenges. If any event occurs on the Taiwan Strait and the wars led threats and the tensions are increasing, we have to think about these grave risks. And in recent 3 years, North Korea, in the eighth the Congress, it held in January 2021, it announced that it will invest more on the nuclear armament, and it is implementing the the solid fuel, ICBM, and many other advanced weapons. And after 2023, the North Korea rather, defined the relation with South Korea as an antagonist relations, and it is making an effort to increase its military readiness. And in February this year, on the anniversary of the military of the people power, the North Korea defined South Korea as an enemy. And amid these circumstances, we see a increasing uncertainty coming from the presidential election, and the Conservative and Democratic parties both announced its policies. And regarding the North Korea and the Taiwan issues and Ukraine war and the Middle East war, the two parties have different views and the policies. If the so-called Trump risk is materialized, the allies will have an increasing concern. So as for Korea, we need to think about the increasing the budget on the U.S. forces stationed on the Korean Peninsula, and the many other issues will be raised by the new government in the U.S. In particular, the trade with China and the nuclear issues. If the theory is materialized, that the non-nuclear proliferation effort will disappear, and the situation may go back to the time before the Washington Declaration. So, as I said, the current security issues are very serious and challenging. The North Korea's the weapons, missiles issues, and Taiwan issues, and the possible conflict between China and the US on the Taiwan Strait. So, with all these risks in place, Korea, as a middle power, is implementing its diplomacy and going forward with the theory of liberal international order. We are called for the clear strategic decision or choice to be made. So based on the alliance between Korea and the US, we need to enhance our capability of self-defense, and the Korea-US, the defense alliance should be institutionalized so that we can increase the horizon for the strong alliances between the US. And in order to institutionalize that kind of effort, I think in this sense, the what has been done at the Camp David is significant. So we celebrate the 71st anniversary of Korea-US alliance. So with the much of development being made recently, the global comprehensive strategic partnership has been discussed. Not just military, the economy and the social values are shared between the two countries. So when it comes to the rivalry between China and the US in accelerating, the United States is still the supremacy country when it comes to security. No matter what, it doesn't need any more explanation. And the US and China has a lot of the causes of conflict and disputes between the two, but the two countries both need to collaborate with each other. So far, we have emphasized that the importance of the Korea, Japan, and the US alliance. With Japan in 2008, the US, Japan implemented the rescue effort. So we have held many trilateral meetings, and including the defense ministers meetings and the Korea-Japan military information protection dialogue. So many other dialogues and platforms have been established to enhance the national security. And I want to make a point of one thing. So there is the back end, the military bases in the Honshu and the other two areas where the US forces are stationed. In Japan, there are 87 military bases, and among them, 7 are the United Nations Command. The UNC is after the World War, is a command forces that can provide support for the Korean Peninsula in case of any contingency. And the 7 bases in the US will play as a bridgehead to provide the support to the Korean Peninsula. So in that sense, Japan is a very important the country that can play a big role in terms of the national defense of Korea. After the declaration at the Camp David, the joint UNC dialogue and the vice ministerial dialogues and many other meetings were planned, and the ministries the Ministers of Defense meeting will be held in the US and in Korea as well. And also the early missile alert system is been in operation since last year. And for the military drill, over the multi-year the joint military drill action has been established, and this year the Freedom Edge drill was first implemented in this year. So in order to institutionalize this kind of the activity, in July we have adopted new initiative. So continuous effort to increase the cooperation between the three countries on the national security front. We need to deter the military threats with the recognition of the importance of the trilateral cooperation in the national defense, and the security cooperation between the three countries will be led based on the strong alliance between Korea and the US. As you know, the Korea-Japan alliance is also important, and that will create a synergy effect when it is well coordinated with the Korea-Japan-US relations and alliance. So regarding the cooperation on the security front between the Korea, US, and Japan, some people say that this type of cooperation is aimed to check the Chinese influence, or the three countries alliance would be discussed. And so against this backdrop, the security cooperation should focus on the strategic area, and the security cooperation on the Korean Peninsula should focus on the domestic issues. And next, I want to talk about the cooperation in relation to the North Korea's nuclear issues. The North Korea's nuclear issue has emerged as an unprecedented threat. And between Korea and the US, there have been a lot of discussions about how to address this issue. So we talked about the introduction of the strategic weapons, or the deployment of nuclear armaments, or the improving the power of deterring the North Korea's. But it is concluded that the strategic enhancement of the military forces by deploying the nuclear armament is considered the best way. So against the nuclear umbrella scheme, the US reaffirmed its commitment to it. US and Korea showed the strongest military alliance, and it has been limited to the combining all the conventional weapons. And as for the nuclear weapons, the current scheme would not have access to handling the strategic and nuclear weapons. So there is a discussion that we need to think about, reconsider about that kind of approach. And at the Washington meeting, we agreed between Korea and Japan to reconsider that issue, and through nuclear, the mutual defense alliance has been introduced. So in that sense, the Korea-US agreed to establish NCG. It is the idea that we got from the MPG of NATO. The NATO is composed of 30 members, and the strategic nuclear armaments were deployed in several countries of NATO members, and how to employ those strategic nuclear weapons should be decided by the thorough network of deliberation of how to deploy it, and that kind of institution is established in the US, and we do not have that kind of scheme between Korea and the US. So we need to think about how to practice that kind of the scenario when it comes to deployment of nuclear armament. So we need to think about how to make the better plan than the NPD. So at the level of NCG, we need to discuss how to NCG framework. So we have produced the report on NCG, and also in July, the nuclear deterrence, another report has been also publicized. And so-called CNI, conventional nuclear integration, at the level of operation command should be materialized, and that is the topic of discussion between Korea and the US military personnel. Since we have the nuclear deterrence strategy was produced on the first half of this year, so the US and Korea military personnel are discussing on this. So the conventional weapons integration has been already in place, and the strategic command is in operation of the deployment of nuclear armaments. So the Korea also need to establish the command of a possible deployment of nuclear armament after the negotiation with the US. So we need to restore the alliance that has been loosened before with the United States, and we need to strengthen it, and we need to have more intense dialogues on military defense cooperation, and we need to make our plan more concrete that can be actually operated. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation regarding the threats from North Korea and the security changes in the region. So from the perspective of responding to these threats, you highlighted the meaning of Camp David, and next is His Excellency Chun Young-woo. Thank you. So today, my previous presenters who were ministers were excellent, so I am delighted and honored to have addition to their presentations. Actually, the three ministers well presented on the meaning of the first anniversary of Camp David, so there are actually nothing for me to add. But there are some things that are not mentioned, so I'd like to focus on these areas. So over the last year, the peace of Korean Peninsula and the security order of the East Asia were the topics that were influenced by three factors. This is almost like an earthquake in the context of geopolitics. First one is Camp David summit, and secondly, end of last year, North Korea. In North Korea, leader Kim Jong-un delivered a speech at the national meeting on giving up Korean reunification, and he said South Korea will be recognized as a sovereignty. So which meant that he will support the two Koreas system. So that changed the backbone of North Korean policy toward South Korea. And the other fact was the meeting of Putin and Kim Jong-un. And there in last June, they signed on the agreement on comprehensive partnership between Russia and North Korea, which will trigger a big change in security order of the region. So I would like to go briefly over the meaning of three factors. First, regarding Camp David, all my previous speakers mentioned. So basically, trilateral cooperation between Korea, US, and Japan. And regarding this, the direction, scope, and the backbone was announced in the name of the spirit of Camp David as well as the principles of Camp David. These two documents has the meaning like this. Not only security, but also economic or technological securities were agreed, and the scope also included supply chain. So this is quite comprehensive document that includes all the necessary elements that can have influence over the trilateral relations. But at the gist of the documentation was to deter the Chinese expansion in the region. At the same time, it also considered the possible threat from North Korea. In particular, on the Taiwanese Strip, they wanted to realize the stability and safety and to compliance with the international laws. These were mentioned in the document, and for Koreans, the previous former President Moon Jae-in had summit with his U.S. counterpart, and the current government led by President Yoon Suk-yeol could mention it, and it has lowered the possibility that the opposition party will raise the voices of opposition, because this is the basic direction that was also declared by the former president from Democratic Party. So deterring the expansion strategy of China is quite meaningful, and this is a common direction in the region. But unfortunately, the Korean people as well as Korean media is not really interested in an important factor, which is a liberal and peaceful Korean peninsula. So unified Korean peninsula that is free and peaceful. This is the basic. But regarding the methodology of unification, we have discussed a lot, which should be non-violent, peaceful unification, but no one talked about the final status of unified Korea. So all the methodologies and tools and means can be mobilized? No. So without mentioning the tools and means of unification, documents mentioned about the final status of unified Korea. So this has no precedence. And Japan also expressed its support idea of support in an official document on the peacefully unified Korea, and Korean people cast doubts over the possibility of a Japanese government officially recognizing the need to establish a peaceful unification of the Korean peninsula. That was quite I actually asked to the Japanese embassy to Korea, and about decades ago, when the former Prime Minister Miyazawa visited Korea, he once expressed his support for the peaceful reunification of the Korean peninsula, but that has been a long time ago, and under the current international circumstances, our regional partners of Japan and US expressed their support for the unification of the Korean Peninsula. That was quite a big outcome from Camp David. And the other thing is that His Excellency Young-kwan mentioned about the national interest-focused approach, which would be the desired approach for the future. I agree. And there are a variety of possible cooperation between Korea, US, and Japan. And the security cooperation is included in the agreement, which is the idea of trilateral partnership. And I believe that the emotional approach can be agreed by a lot of Korean people, but the Korean government took the approach from the pragmatic perspective for Japan. That once seemed to be like impossible, almost like a suicidal activity, because Japan seemed like a behavior of evil. Under the circumstances, that was quite politically dangerous, but at the same time, for the future of the Korean Peninsula and for the future of the trilateral cooperation for security, that marked a new watershed or a milestone. Last year, Kim Jong-un announced the two-nation theory. So he recognized Korea as an independent power. I don't put many importance on it because what really matters here is the prerequisite. Is it not a thing that North Korea may violently invade Korea? When North Korea is under a lot of stress, the rhetoric from the North Korean leader becomes very intense, but this implies that Korean Peninsula will be permanently separated so that the Kim Jong-un regime would be maintained. So in order to bolster this idea, he would utilize the shields of nuclear weapons and two-nation or two-states idea. But I believe that this will take a step backward to the path to the unification of the Korean Peninsula. And I believe that this rhetoric is quite violent and aggressive. And this seems to be in the same context of Eastern Germany rhetoric that was made back in 1970s, which chose the idea of two states that was chosen in 1942, and that was repeated on the today's Korean Peninsula by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And that will have influence over the Korean Peninsula's future. So back in 1992, through the basic agreements between two Koreas, the then leaders agreed that South Korea and North Korea are not two different countries. But is that something that Kim Jong-un takes back? The gist of the joint agreement that was taken in 1992. So I believe that the comprehensive partnership and its agreement is really important under the circumstances, and the military alliance in 1962 must be restored. If you take a look at the items of the agreement, when he wants, Putin can militarily intervene to the domestic situations of the region. And I believe that the prevailing thoughts and spirit of the alliance is the Russian mentality over North Korea that they owe a lot for North Korea. So it's upon North Korea's choice if they would like to support or not. So when North Korea requested, Russians did not support its missiles. So at that time, North Korea needed to dispatch diplomats to Egypt so that they could be supported with the missiles. So in a nutshell, North Korea doesn't have any choice or any right to decide. But at least now, on April 3 of 2022, UN opposed North Korean approach. UN blamed Russian approach of intervening Ukraine, and there are only 3 countries who supported Russian invasion. And North Korea was the only country that provided military support to Russia. So as of now, Russian leader Putin is being isolated from the international community, but North Korea is ready to support its missiles and other military aids. So North Korea is, under the circumstances now, is the only brother of Russia, and regarding food and energy, the bilateral cooperation will be maintained. And even the satellite technology for intelligence use could be also interchanged. So Russia will not just wink at North Korean request to support this type of partnership. And these 2 countries are quite hostile toward the US-led international order these days. And they are like agonizing over how to collapse the US-led international order, and they are being alienated from the international community, and they are like joining hands together to oppose or to go against the US. And I believe that those who can take the biggest advantage from the situation is China, because North Korea is trusting Russia, and they are provoking the international community, because for North Korea, Russia is the shoulder to lean on. So there may be more provocations from North Korea and for the security order in the region. The alliance between Russia and North Korea can be utilized by the Russian government to order North Korea to do something against the US. And there is a Sea's Commemoration Day, which is a holiday in North Korea, and the Chinese ambassador did not attend the ceremony to express the strategic uncomfortable feeling, which means that China is feeling that they are alienated from this partnership between Russia and North Korea. But actually, China doesn't lose anything from being isolated, because as of now, for China, the most important thing is their relations with Taiwan. So without Russia-North Korean alliance, China keeps ordering North Korea to provoke the US. However, these days, the military power of China is focused more on Taiwan. This is the reason that Kim Jong-un would not say yes to the order from China uh, to go against the US. So when Russian-North Korean alliance is being enhanced, China might take advantage. So they would utilize China like Russia so that they can have more influence and bigger say. So this is the reason that I say that China can take advantage of the enhanced Russia-North Korea alliances because they can focus more on Taiwan and they will have more options. So in this regard, this will pose a threat to the future of the security and order of the region. Can I take 2 more minutes? And regarding ROK-U.S alliance, the deterrence of expansion has been the big topic. So we created NCG and other things, and so we tried a lot to make it more elaborate in the region. But this, in reality, cannot actually enhance the deterrence. This is actually for domestic use rather than deterrence. It's more about reassurance of the domestic situation for the Korean people. But for Japan, so we're banning Japan these days. So Yokosuka and other cities of Japan are not in the partnership or network in the region. So the missile cannot go over the open territory or sea of Japan. But at the same time, we're trusting a lot on the US deterrence strategies, and we let Busan port to be used for US Navy. So if North Korea attacks South Korea, we're quite not so sure that the US will safeguard us. Even if we are establishing and launching a lot of NCGs and other types of partnership, we are still not reassured in any possible cases of North Korean attack to South Korea. So the commitment from the US that the US will safeguard South Korea is not trusted enough. So they say nuclear and conventional weapons or all available weapons will secure the end of North Korean regime. That's what the US says. But they are still talking about conventional weapons. So is that like they won't use nuclear weapons, but they will just use conventional weapons? This is the reason that the US highlights the importance of deterrence. We are not really sure about it, and at SCM, the doubts are not cleared. So people are casting doubts. So how to ease or address the issue of doubts would be the assignment or task that we need to solve, because this is quite a repeated topic for all of us. So we need an alliance that is reassuring, that's trustworthy, so that Korean people will be eased of the concern that US may not safeguard Korea in case of North Korean attack. So thank you for listening. Thank you, His Excellency Chun Young-woo, for your insights on the security situation. I learned a lot. So he shared his thoughts on the vision for unified Korean Peninsula, and wow, my preparations are not sufficient. It's only 1.5 hours where the former ministers and other experts are gathered here. So from now, I would like to give the floor to ask questions to the panelists for this session. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand from the audience. We have 10 minutes left, so if you have any questions, please, we'll give you the opportunity from now.
If you ask a question, please let us know whom do your question is addressed to. I am a member of the usual. I'm very pleased to be here with the former ministers. So I feel very honored to be here in front of you, the former minister, the excellencies. Regarding the extended deterrence, so with that kind of a deterrence, we are here living safely under the protection of the extended deterrence. And there were a lot of talks, and we are talking about the revision of LSE. And to protect the Tokyo, can we sacrifice the LLE? So a lot of talks are being heard these days. If you look at the Western film, the villains carries a gun, and then we see a very interesting phenomenon going on. And the same thing goes to Japan. Even we think about the Japan and North Korea, and I think North Korea will enhance its nuclear armaments if the US and Japan will not take any bold, may not be taking bold actions. So why do we not consider these issues if there are some possibility that Japan or any other country can withdraw from NPT, and if the powers have some nuclear armaments that have been ignored, and as time goes by, we see some reverse situation. We are living in a new Cold Era, so the countries are rushing to help North Korea. And what is Russia doing? And there is no control over the current situation. And Japan and US have their own perspectives. And why is Korea not equipped with the nuclear armaments? And they may ask this question. So maybe we can share some nuclear armaments, like the case in NATO. So how can we develop the nuclear armaments in the partnership with Korea and Japan? And I share my opinion like this, and I want to hear from His Excellency Chang, and you can respond to it. So, His Excellency Chang, please respond. The former president of France, de Gaulle, protected the Paris, and he was asked to give up the relationship with the US. And at the time, Russia has a lot of nuclear weapons. And now we have the advanced missile protection system. And if the Soviet Union used that kind of capability, we could not protect ourselves with that kind of advanced defense system. In Alaska, the US deployed the missiles and they used that kind of missiles. And North Korea's nuclear weapons or any type of missiles could not reach to the US soil. So the rationale that was used by the President de Gaulle cannot be applicable to North Korea's situation. Now, there is a monitoring system of North Korea's nuclear armaments, and we have that kind of satellites, and there are about more than 100 of those satellites. So 24/7, the nuclear movement of North Korea is monitored. So the US would know if North Korea will shoot the nuclear missiles in the 5 minutes before it happens. So even if North Korea shoots a missile, it may not reach North Korea, US soil. And I wrote a column. If Russia shoots or North Korea shoots a missile, they might not kill selectively the people on the Korean Peninsula. About 160,000 Korean expats in the US. And if North Korea shoots the nuclear weapons and with that missiles, if about the 100 or 100,000 people die, with that calculation, would they not shoot the nuclear weapon? Do you think so? I think the US may deploy the armed forces to end the demise of North Korea. So no matter what, they will not change the course of North Korea. So we are living in a different world of the former President of war.
Let me add something more. So, in order to solve the North Korean nuclear issue, the US position is quite clear. Without active role of China, we cannot solve the issue of North Korea, which was shown in the document made in 1996 when the former US President Bill Clinton visited Jeju-do Island with his Korean counterpart, Kim Yong-sam. So from the Geneva Agreement, via the political dialogue between the interested parties, we will induce North Korea to implement non-proliferation or non-nuclear, but that could not bear any fruits. So later that, back in 2005, Bush administration inaugurated in the United States, and he suggested the six-party talks where China plays the role of chair. That was the opinion from the US, and they forcibly requested to China, but I'm not really sure whether that was true or not. At that time, in case when China cannot deter North Korean nuclear, US will not deter Japan going nuclear. So from the geopolitical perspective, North Korean nuclear issue could become the issue for the great powers of the global stage. And as I mentioned during my presentation, China has the capacity. However, the Chinese government says that North Korea would not follow Chinese government because there is a limit on the influence of the Chinese government toward North Korea. But we don't 100% agree about the remarks because North Korea is heavily depending upon China. Given this situation, North Korean nuclear issue of going nuclear can theoretically one option. However, thinking about the current international situation or thinking about the position from the US, North Korea cannot make any decisions alone. So I believe that this type of potential issue can be solved via dialogue. So I believe that a constructive dialogue between the US and China would be possible regarding North Korean issue. In this regard, at Korea-China-Japan summit, this North Korean nuclear issue must be talked. So far, this trilateral summit has focused on economic issues, but now is the time that security issue and economic issue cannot be separated. Given that we have to think about or talk about North Korean nuclear issue at Korea-China-Japan summit. This is one topic that we must bring about at the table at the trilateral summit. Thank you. So I would like to add something.
And this issue is deeply related to the US-led world order and US leadership. And so far, the US diplomatic policy and external policy centers around the non-nuclear proliferation policy. Except the nuclear powers, the other countries are not allowed to develop nuclear armaments. So sometimes they threaten the other countries, sometimes they encourage others not to have it. So they sometimes give the commitment to protecting those countries instead of those countries developing the nuclear armaments. But then the other alliances in a very strategic region, the US tried to withdraw from the commitments. If that happens and Korea is not free from that kind of scenario, if that happens and Korea is included of those the countries, that we may think of an option to developing the nuclear weapons. So everything can be up on the table for the discussion. But now the situation is not that situation that I have just described. So if the situation exacerbates to isolationist trend, then verbally we can declare our commitment and the enormous sense of threat when it comes to national security that we, Korea, need to think about the development of nuclear weapons. But without that situation, we do not talk about that we do not trust the US commitment to protecting South Korea if we express that our willingness to develop nuclear weapons. So that may affect the relation between Korea and the US. So I don't think this is a time to talk about the possible development of nuclear weapons. And we need to think about the cost and effects of the coming to the nuclear umbrella scheme. Thank you very much. So we are joined by the three excellencies, the former ministers, and we have discussed about the results of the Camp David summit and the going forward. Thank you very much for your excellence.